a lot of the usual suspects out of a green-white aggro deck. He is playing Silverblade Paladin, he's playing Voice of Resurgence, Scavenging Ooze, Avacyn's Pilgrim, Luxodon Smiter. You did mention that with some of the life gain that he's playing, he has a package, he has 2 Tristani for Advent of the Worm in his deck.
Plus the Scavenging Ooze.
Plus the Scavenging Ooze. So that's a little bit of a nod to what we saw in some of the green-white decks in block, actually, with like the Tristani Advent package.
This, I think, is an example of the deck that would be a stone nightmare for mono-red aggro.
Absolutely. Probably the most efficient creatures in the format, coupled with a bunch of life gain.
Yeah, giant guys too big to burn, lots of life gain, lots of cheap plays. There's just nothing good for a mono-red player here. However, Tim, not on mono-red, he is instead on Jund. How do you like Tim's chances here?
Well, I noticed, my first thought is that Jund lacks an actual sweeper a lot of the time. You know, it's not a pure control deck, and one of the things that Green-White has a lot of trouble with is that, you know, it has a lot of trouble dealing with sweepers, because it has no choice but to commit to the board a lot of the time. So because of that, I wouldn't be surprised if Jonathan can sneak in some games here, can just overwhelm the removal spells that Blakesley's playing.
Yeah, a lot of his threats are difficult for Blakesley to deal with. That said, Blakesley's build is definitely more sweeper heavy than most Jund decks, with 4 main deck Bonfire of the Dams and a main deck Mizium Mortars, plus Barter and Bloods in the sideboard.
Now that's a lot of removal for a Jund
and
deck.
To say nothing of like Golgari Charm. So he's got quite a bit more removal than most Jund decks. That said, Jonathan does have the ability to ready in response to a bonfire.
Yeah,
for the surprise blowouts.
I think that's interesting. He's chosen that. We've seen Rootborn Defenses get played sometimes in these decks. He's chosen that as an upgrade over Rootborn Defenses. Rather than having to populate, he wants to have the untap trigger.
Yeah, interesting. Maybe he figures the populates just win more, whereas this, like, sometimes he just wants the surprise blowouts in combat.
Yeah, certainly I don't think people are playing around it.
No, not a lot of... I mean, I just think the format's not ready.
All right. So we have our game underway. Blakesley is on a 6-card hand. Job leads off on Forest with no second play. Blood Crypt comes from Blakesley's side. And the first threat of the game is going to be Job's in a Scavenging Ooze.
Yeah, Scavenging Ooze, one of the absolute biggest cards in M14. First unveiled in Commander a little while back. Now it's in Standard for the first time. He doesn't completely dominate the game early, but he is a respectable turn 2 play that can turn into a very powerful threat later on.
Yeah, there's few...
And he solves a lot of problems.
When I think about like 2-drops that can turn themselves into 6/6s, like Scavenging Ooze is on a very short list of creatures that has that ability. So we see no turn 2 play from Blakesley. He does not have the Ooze or a Farseek, and Job will continue to commit. He will play a Luxodon Smiter on turn 3.
Yeah, I think Jonathan's actually got... I think he's the favorite, assuming that he doesn't just get blown out by Olivia. I think the matchup's going to come down. I mean, Lifebane Zombie is certainly very good, and Thragtusk is solid. If you Miracle a Bonfire, that's fantastic. But I think that it's really just all about Olivia.
Right. So if Blakesley is able to keep up with some of the aggro, he has on turn 3 a Mizium Mortars for the Luxodon Smiter. He's going to go ahead and put a land into play tapped. He takes 2 again off Scavenging Ooze. Job opts not to grow his Scavenging Ooze. He's using his mana for
Tristani?
A different play, and that's, yeah, it's going to be Tristani. So main deck Tristani, I would say, is fairly unique to Job's list. Sometimes we see them out of the board, but this is certainly, I kind of like what he's doing with it.
Yeah, I think it's just a function of these Archangel decks. Like, I think we saw the first of it in Knoxville last week, but it's part of that reaction to the amount of fast aggro that there is in the format. You know, it's kind of trying to be one step ahead of all the Burning Earth decks.
So he's pre-boarding in a certain sense here.
Yep, absolutely.
So we see a first creature from Blakesley. It's going to be a Huntmaster of the Fells, but in turn, Job plays his 5th mana and casts, as you said before, Archangel of Thune. This is a really strong interaction because Archangel gains life off Tristani, and that life gain immediately triggers Archangel, putting a counter on all of his creatures.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, this is really the interaction that this deck is built on. Tristani into Archangel of Throne is like, it's just such a devastating opening it's such a devastating sequence against anything but a control deck. And here, even though, you know, Blakesley's been forced into the role of a control deck, but he doesn't really have great tools for dealing with creatures that big.
Yeah, I mean, every creature Job plays now is going to put a counter on his entire team.
Yep, and he's going to be gaining a huge amount of life and have a board that's threatening to kill Tim in 2 turns if Tim can live 2 turns.
All right, so he's going to pass and flip his Huntmaster, but with all of Job's creatures growing, the Ravager of the Fells is not going to actually kill anything. It's just going to deal 2 damage to Job, dropping him to 23. That's probably not the relevant thing right now, though. At least Job's life totals. That's going to continue to climb.
It does make it harder for Jonathan to potentially attack with his Scavenging Ooze for fear of a bad trade. But that said, I think we're really just going to see...
All right, Job's going to dump creatures out.
He's going to gain a ton of life, and remember, every time the Archangel attacks also, you're going to get things even bigger.
This is going to be out of control very quickly.
This
so first is Voice of Resurgence.
Everybody
put a
who
counter
liked
on everyone.
Archangel of Throne from the pre-order season.
This is what they.
Yeah, this is validating.
This is out of control.
Oh my gosh.
Looks it on Smiter. Anthem's the team again.
6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 15,
5/5 Smiter.
19, 23, 20. So he's got 24 points of power on the table and like much more life than he started with. Miracle Bonfire does not do anything at this point.
No.
Tim's just way too far behind,
Yeah,
right? Like even Olivia is not going to, make him any headway. What he really needs to do is immediately kill any Archangel he sees.
Right.
He cannot.
Yeah. So just to recap, we have a 5/5 Smiter, a 5/5 Ooze, a 4/4 Voice, a 6/7 Angel, a 5/8 Tristani, just all huge numbers.
Right. So, here comes, he's threatening as much as 17, so he's going to have to block. But he's got no real way to make progress next turn. Like, a Miracle Bonfire doesn't even help him.
No, both Archangel and Tristani. Actually, all the creatures except for Voice of Resurgence are out of Bonfire range at this point.
And to say that Voice of Resurgence is bonfireable is kind of a stretch.
Well, no, then he gets worse because then he comes back and triggers again.
Yeah, and puts more counters on things and gains more life and is even bigger than it was originally. Like right now, the Voice is merely a 4/4.
Yeah.
The Elemental coming back would be a 6/6 after it got its counter.
I think what we were doing is Blakesley was just checking there to make sure that the order of the counters. Okay, looks like Job missed a trigger, so he's actually only at 28 life. He missed one of the life. He missed a life gain trigger.
Well, Tim wins the moral victory.
Yes.
Jonathan, more importantly, wins the game.
All right.
And I just lost the game. We go to game 2 in a moment. We're going to be sideboarding.
Yeah. So if you're Blakesley, it's always interesting to look at sideboarding from the side of like the known deck player because he does. Job presumably has a plan for his Jund matchup. Blakesley may not actually have a plan for his Archangel Thune Tristani matchup.
Yeah, how many opponents do you expect to be Archangel of Thrune plus Tristaniing you? Right. That said, he's got some tools. He's got a Putrefy, he's got a Dreadbore, he's got a Vraska, he's got 2. I think even Liliana the Veil, it's not always going to be that amazing, like if they play a Voice or something, but you're going to be able to sneak, you're going to hit an occasional like Luxon on Smiter or something. And you have 2 Barter and Bloods. So I actually think Tim's post-sideboard matchup is going to be a lot better because his game 1 looked awful.
Yeah, he's going to want anything that could be a hard answer to an Archangel of Thune. So like you said,
Tristani.
Or Tristani. So once again, he does have 3 Life Bane zombies in the main. Those are still going to be great. But yeah, I think the fact that he has a lot of cards like Putrefy and Dreadbore that just say destroy target creature and don't care about its size is really good for him.
As long as he can keep like the 3 biggest creatures, like if Jonathan plays 5 creatures, if you can kill the 3 biggest ones, that should buy Tim enough time to just take over a game with Olivia.
So if
he draws Olivia.
Do you still keep in cards like Scavenging Ooze in this matchup? The reason I'm asking is that there's cards when you have a card like Scavenging Ooze, Jonathan, all his creatures are getting so large so quickly that it's it's pretty hard for Ooze to make itself relevant in the matchup.
You're talking about on Tim's side?
On Tim's side, yeah. Well, if you want to keep in, your low impact cards.
So the Ooze does do a few things. You might want to take it out, but at least it makes Jonathan's Ooze not get bigger if you can sort of stay ahead there. But that's not really the kind of game he wants to be playing. There's a good chance that the Ooze is just the lowest impact card. What do you think about? Is that?
That's Rakdos' return.
Rakdos' return?
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you think? Do you think Rakdos' return is fast enough for this matchup?
I don't know. I usually try to not keep it in against decks that are trying to dump their whole hand really quickly. I'm inclined not to bring it in. I'd just rather kill all his creatures. That said, it might not be the first thing that comes out.
Yeah, if you take out the 3 oozes and the 2 Rakdos's returns, that's 5. You have to bring in Putrefied, Dreadbore, 2 Lilianas, 2 Barter and Bloods, and a Vraska. That's 7 already, and that's not even counting if you want Pillar of Flame. Which
Right.
you probably want Pillar of Flame just because Voice of
Voice is a
Resurgence,
card.
and who knows how many elves.
And there's Silverblade Paladin in here too. Blakesley doesn't know that.
He might if he's seen the classic deck list.
Yeah.
So one of the valuable. One of the reasons why it's so valuable to stay on top of all the winning SCG Open and SCG Classic tournament decks.
Yeah, so fun conversation between the two. Job asks, "Do you got a strat for me?" Tim comes back, "No, but I'm gonna give it a go, I guess."
Very nice.
All right. So on Job's side, he does have the Ready Willings that we saw before. He does have a plan to go bigger in Garruk Primal Hunter, which is actually a card that Blakesley can have some difficulty in dealing with.
And then, of course, either Celestia Charm or Oblivion Ring, just to give him answers to Olivia, the
Right.
one card that can actually beat him.
Yeah. The one thing I'm looking at in his sideboard that's something I haven't seen too much is he has Wolfear Avenger in his sideboard. I imagine, it's not typically a card when I think of sideboard style cards. It's a 3/3 for 3, but assuming he likes it, is this the kind of matchup he wants it in?
I think that the Wolfear Avenger is like the Ready Willing. It's for the Supreme Verdict matchup.
Okay.
I don't think that I mean, it's possible you bring it in just because it's a body, but I don't think that's why you put it in your sideboard in the first place. You put it in your sideboard because you want to have percentage against control, like a blue-white control deck.
Right.
And I think there's a very good chance that we just don't even see Ready Willing. I mean, maybe we do, but I think there's a good chance that he just wants to be as mana efficient as possible and rely on his creatures being giant to have Bonfire be neutered.
So Celestia Charm,
And
Oblivion Ring.
Yeah, I think those
and
are,
that's it.
Yeah, or possibly Garruk. Like, he might be like, okay, well, he's going to have enough removal, I want to be able to go over the top. But he also might just think that's going to slow him down too much.
Right.
He's obviously played a lot more with the deck than either of us, so I'm sure he'll have the answers. But I think the main thing he needs to do is stay fast and make sure he doesn't lose to Olivia. As long as he does those two things, I think he's going to be in the driver's seat even after sideboarding. However, he doesn't know it, but Tim's sideboard is much more effective than most Jund decks against this strategy, with multiple barters, Vraska, and lots of additional removal to try to slow Jonathan down.
Yeah, so one of the things in Johnson's deck, when you actually look at removal spells, in the main deck, the only answers he actually has to Olivia, he plays 2 Garruk Relentless and 2 Fiend Hunters. Is Fiend Hunter, so do you leave in Fiend Hunter in this kind of matchup? It does answer creatures, but it's not really a great threat on its own.
No, I'm not sure. I know that, it is a tough way to try to deal with a Huntmaster or an Olivia, since it's so unreliable. I think there's a good chance you just don't want that, and you want to instead just be like, okay, I have 2 Celestia Charms, 1 Oblivion Ring, and maybe, and the Garruks, obviously.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, just some games I'm just going to lose to Olivia. Because there's really nothing that you want a Fiend Hunter. Like, you certainly don't want a Fiend Hunter or Lifebane Zombie.
So it looks like for a second game, Blakesley is going to start on a mulligan. He's on the play this time, though.
Yep, but he is mulliganing to 6 once again. Never a good sign, but Jund can take it. Although it gets harder if you're on the I want to have lots of spot removal plan against a deck full of so many heavy hitters.
Yeah, I think one of the benefits of the Archangel deck is that really one unanswered threat is pretty scary, and almost all the cards when they go unanswered can have a huge impact.
All right, both players just building their mana base.
And we actually have seen out of Blakesley's, he looks like he's sided in Slaughter games in this matchup.
Interesting. Are you playing? Does he want to Slaughter games the Archangel that bad?
Well, I was kind of going to ask you about the same thing. I kind of feel that Slaughter games is one of those cards that gets boarded in a lot more than I feel like it necessarily should.
It's a good combo with Lifebane.
It's a good combo with Lifebane. So now he's actually, as long as he makes sure he hits a card that's in Job's hand, it's going to turn out to be fine.
It is an expensive way to spend mana on something that they didn't.
Yeah. So you see Advent of the Worm, Celestia Charm, Fiend Hunter, and Wolfear Avenger.
So he did keep the Fiend Hunters in. He does have the Celestia Charm as a plan against Olivia. It is possible that Tim will Slaughter games the Advent of the Worm, but things are looking pretty good for Tim. He most likely takes the Wolfear Avenger here because you don't want a Fiend Hunter or a Lifebane Zombie.
Yeah.
And then if he Slaughter games the Advent of the Worm, he's completely shut down Jonathan's offense so far. If he's got anything to follow it up with.
And he's actually going to go ahead and take Fiend Hunter.
He does take the Fiend Hunter, so that kind of suggests,
That to me suggests that he has an Olivia.
But see, Jonathan's got the Celestia Charm in hand.
Right.
I don't know.
And Jonathan, as we saw there, isn't committed to making the 2/2. You know, he's leaving it for a possible Olivia. He had the option there to make a knight and didn't.
Oh yeah. I think for sure. The whole. I mean, you wouldn't want a boarding Grizzly Bear in this matchup.
Yeah.
What you want is answers to Olivia. So Tim bringing the beats.
Shock, and we're gonna see Slaughter games.
Advent of the Worm, I suppose.
That would be my guess. Certainly he knows it's in Job's hand.
But it could be Celestia Charm too, because if Jonathan doesn't respond, you can take the Celestia Charm so that you know your Olivia lives, because you just took Fiend Hunter. Now you take Celestia Charm.
Celestia Charm. See, flashes Wolfie Avenger into play in response to Celestia Charm, and now let's Blakesley name.
Wow, if he takes Celestia Charm, he's going to be rewarded.
And actually, he didn't name. It looks like he didn't name any of the cards in Job's hand. He named Archangel of Thune.
The Archangel of Thune was so traumatic to him that I think
he seems completely scared by this card.
It's a body. He's got a body in his hand. I think you just got to take either Celestia Charm or Advent of the Worm there. But.
Yeah, I mean, and I've said before, I feel like the Slaughter Game style effect is one of those effects that I think a lot of times it's really hard to evaluate how to play it correctly. You know. Sure, Archangel is the best card in Job's deck, but there's a decent chance that Job never even draws one this game. You know.
Well, he definitely won't now.
Yep. Yeah, and basically that gives Job free reign to cast Advent of the Worm.
Yeah. Well, all right. So on this plan, I mean, if Tim's got 2 removal spells, he just has to deal with the Avenger and the Advent of the Worm. And then he'd still have to fight through 2 Celestia Charms, which basically turns off Olivia for now. But it's also possible that Tim has his other Slaughter games and is planning on taking the Celestia Charms at an opportune moment.
So we see the swing from Wolfie Avenger, a trade, so putting Blakesley down to 15 because he shocked off that stomping ground. He in return puts Job down to 14.
What's he gonna have for this 5/5 that's about to start brawling?
Well, I don't know, and we know that Job has actually drawn another Wolfie Avenger. Blakesley will make Thragtusk, so that's an answer to the 5/5.
No, really. He's got 2 Celestia Charms.
Yeah, that's probably not an answer to the 5/5.
Like if you're just taking, well, yeah. So even if he blocks the Advent of the Worm, you can still exile it in response, so that you do 5 trample damage.
Mm-hmm. Which is actually better than pumping the worm.
And you could attack with the Wolfie Avenger too, just because if he blocks, you can just regenerate.
So Thragtusk doesn't
it's possible. Yeah, you could actually Celestia Charm first and then attack with both, if you wanted. It gives him the option of being able to block something, but...
Yeah, I mean, see, Job's land for the turn is Gavany Township, which that makes the blocking the worm particularly unappealing here.
Yeah. Yep, definitely. This is a real hard spot for Tim now.
Yeah, so Tim can't really block the worm because then he'll just Township. If Tim blocks the Wolfie Avenger, then he just regenerates. So Job can kill the Thragtusk without using a card either way.
But it does stop Jonathan from putting +1/+1 counters on his squad.
Right.
I think... I mean, so Barter in Blood is pretty good. But if Jonathan has mana up, he can always threaten to Celestia Charm in response to help, feed the Barter in Blood.
Job's hand has 2 Celestia Charms and a Wolfie Avenger, so if he really wants to protect a creature from Barter in Blood, he has a lot of ways to do it.
Yeah.
And it looks like, and Blakesley turns out he just takes all 8. Going to 12, and he's just going to go ahead and race. Remember, Job can flash 5 more power into play on end step here.
Yeah, I think Tim needs to, it looks like what he's looking to do is do enough damage so that when he miracles a bonfire next turn, he wins.
Right.
And he also needs to not die.
Right, okay, so step 1, get enough damage that a miracle bonfire wins. The bonfire would be for 5, so he needs to put his opponent down to 9. Or needs to deal 9 to his opponent. Can't do it, he can only deal 8.
So now we're on the try to not die plan.
Right, so now the try to not die plan. The Thragtusk is still back to block, but kind of as we saw last turn, it's not really a great place for Thragtusk to be, and I don't see that equation changing too much. But he puts Job down to 11, and looks like he passes the turn. Job's going to make another Wolfie Avenger.
And he decides not to play another 2/2.
Using both the Celestia Charms as tricks, he draws Fiend Hunter for the turn. So
Life is
of
very
removal.
life is very good in Archangel Land.
And you go with another swing. Blakesley's going to go ahead and put Thragtusk in front of Wolfear Avenger. Job's in this great spot where he has a ton of removal spells and doesn't have to play any of them.
Yeah, I mean, a greedier line would have been to Celestia Charm the Thragtusk, then Fiend Hunter the token. But he's got enough things going on for him. He would rather just keep his mana open to play around as much as possible.
Yeah, so the regen is going to happen. Thragtusk will hit the bin. Blakesley will drop to 4, gets a 3/3 beast. If you're Job, do you have to worry about about getting lethal here? That's how you lose, right?
I think you have to Fiend Hunter, okay, if he has a land, he can still Celestia Charm and regenerate a Wolfear. But remember, an attack back for 6 puts him at 5, and that Miracle Bonfire is 5.
Yeah. He did have an option here. If you want to be very aggressive, he could have made that attack and then dumped both his Celestia Charms to try to lethal this turn.
Yeah, but why
do that?
Why play into a Putrefy or something? He's in such a good spot. I think at this point, his main thing is play around spot removal and don't die to Bonfire.
As we said before, the Bonfire potentially puts him is a 5-point Bonfire.
It is a 5-point Bonfire.
And there's 6 power on the board, so
there
that is 11. And so, like you said, the best thing to do there is just to Fiend Hunt away the token. And Blakesley running out of time here doesn't miracle the Bonfire.
Now, the reason I think I would go the other way instead of Fiend Huntering is that a Bonfire for 5 completely wraths Jonathan's side of the board.
Right.
So extends the hand. Tim still at now he's at 2-2, and Jonathan Job at 3-1, with Archangel of Thrune making big waves. This is the second week in a row that card has been here in a big way, and from the looks of it, it very much just has its way with the Jund deck.
Yeah, I mean, as we saw there, Blakesley felt so overwhelmed by the card that he boarded in Slaughter Games just for it, and Slaughter Games it even when he knew it wasn't in Job's hand. So certainly a very powerful card against Jund if it's causing that.
This is interesting. I'd like to see some of this Archangel deck's other matchups, because so far from what I've seen, it looks absolutely fantastic against all the Burning Earth decks, and it looks fantastic against Jund.
Yeah.
I bet that it struggles with blue-white control, but from the looks of it, there's actually not a ton of blue-white control out there today.
Right, and I think that's exactly what you said. A green-white deck, when we were talking, we saw Alex Sittner playing a mono-red deck, and we said, what would be his nightmare matchup? You kind of basically described Jonathan Job's deck. A green-white deck with life gain and creatures. And it's pretty good against our mid-range decks.
Yeah, I think this is the best deck I've seen of the weekend so far. It has overcome the previous candidates. I think this one is exciting. This is a pretty fantastic metagame call by Jonathan Job.
One thing I've noticed about this